The Dark Knight pitted against Jack the Ripper in the late 1800s is an awesome concept and one that debuted as Gotham by Gaslight as part of DC's Elseworlds series in the 1980s. It has a pretty huge fanbase, warranting a sequel and almost a video game at one point, and now it finds itself as the latest entry in DC's animated lineup, directed by Sam Liu. That name may make the more tuned-in ones among you shudder for reasons that are about to become clear. DC's latest animated efforts have been not great to say the least. The Killing Joke adaptation was marred by poor animation and questionable additions to the story, while Batman and Harley Quinn felt like some sort of internal competition to see who could make the most toe-curling, cringe-inducing 70 minutes possible, and both of those films are directed by Sam Liu.
Don't be getting any funny ideas.
Too late. It's funny. I always kind of thought you and Batman didn't like girls.
Wait, what?
Turns out Liu was probably never the issue, because Gotham by Gaslight is actually pretty good, and one creative voice is very keenly missing from this whole affair that was present in the previous two disasters: Bruce Timm. Timm is of course one of the key creative minds behind the beloved Batman animated series, but his input as of late, with maybe the exception of Batman Strange Days, has been exceptionally juvenile, and it certainly makes me wonder whether Paul Dini was a critical component to reining in some of Timm's more questionable ideas. With Liu taking on Timm's role here, Gotham by Gaslight is a significantly more mature and palatable affair. Penned by Jim Krieg, perhaps most well known for the Flashpoint Paradox, this interpretation of Gotham by Gaslight is very far removed from its source material, but in spite of that, its brand new take on events is arguably an improvement in every way. The source material is very much a concept piece. While it's packed with atmosphere and its unique take on Gotham is a sight to behold, it's much too short to really tell a satisfying story. It telegraphs the identity of the Ripper far too clearly, and while his motivations are tied deeply into the foundations of Batman's character, they feel like a bit of a stretch even by Elseworlds standards. This animated adaptation not only changes the identity of the killer, but it significantly overhauls the plot, leaving only a few remaining ties to its source. Perhaps one of the biggest changes is the inclusion of various characters from the Batman Rogues Gallery. Poison Ivy, Hugo Strange, and Harvey Dent are just a few examples, and they exist to service the story rather than feeling like ham-fisted attempts at fan service. Selina Kyle is perhaps the most prominent inclusion here, playing a critical role in not only characterizing this incarnation of Bruce Wayne, but also aiding Batman in finding the killer. While I'm not convinced this new villain and his motivations are much of an improvement over the original, I do find the build-up to be much more engaging, introducing far more convincing turning points and building on these character incarnations in really interesting ways. Somehow this manages to feel more like an entry in the Batman animated series than the most recent content actively striving for that accolade. I'm someone who's very attached to the animated series cast, as I'm sure you're aware by now, but the voice actors here justify their presence with some pretty great performances.
I don't think the doorman was quite convinced that I'm a man.
If he was, I'd have to have him dismissed.
Bruce Greenwood is no stranger to Batman at this point, having played him most famously in Under the Red Hood, and while certain lines could probably do with a little bit more enthusiasm, he carries both Bruce Wayne and Batman with real confidence, nailing the commanding presence of the Dark Knight while capturing the suave playboy nature of Bruce Wayne. The biggest surprise for me was Jennifer Carpenter's Selina Kyle. I know her best for her on-screen work in Dexter and The Exorcism of Emily Rose, but I was never really aware of her voice work. Often live-action stars can really struggle with the extra exaggeration required of voice acting, leading to flat performances, but Carpenter's just great here. Seductive, feisty, vulnerable, everything you want Selina Kyle to be, she has nailed it. The same goes for Anthony Head's Alfred and Scott Patterson's Commissioner Gordon. This is certainly not another case of Peter Dinklage in Destiny.
I've laid out your mourning clothes.
I have my own manner of mourning.
Revenge.
Her blood cries out for it.
Onto the animation, which is of course the basis for my channel and the most critical aspect of any animated feature. This is on the whole a Japanese production. The animation comes to us from the Answer Studio, a Japanese company founded by former Walt Disney Japan staff, one of which is Kazuyoshi Takeuchi, who is the chief supervisor on this project and has previously worked on iconic films like Akira. With a reliance on some very strong freelancers such as Hirotaka Nii and Toshiharu Sugie, two names fans of Dragon Ball will know for their contributions to Super, Gotham by Gaslight's animation is reasonably strong for a Western production. Its action scenes, although displaying the rather floaty, over in-between quality of Western animation, are impactful, with a focus on highly choreographed hand-to-hand combat. Its dialogue scenes don't fare quite as well, unfortunately, with many of them falling back on stills with flapping mouths. While that's certainly normal for TV productions, particularly in Japan, theatrical films tend to feature far more character acting, particularly ones with Western grounding. The film storyboard comes from 11 different people, and as a result is one of the most inconsistent aspects of the production. While many scenes feature fantastic and creative angles, a very large bulk are remarkably flat and uninspired, and this is hugely emphasized by the absolute weakest part of the film's visuals, the background art. This has to be some of the worst I've seen in a film in quite some time. On the whole, the backgrounds lack any sense of depth or texture. The way the buildings meet the ground is remarkably sterile, and I think sterile best describes the aesthetic on the whole. For a film all about the dark and grimy feel of an 1800s murder mystery, cleanliness is the last thing that needs to come to mind. With great character designs that feel like a darker take on Bruce Timm's classic work, and the aforementioned action animation, it is a shame that such a critical component really drags the film down and leads the quality aspects swimming in a sea of amateur-looking surroundings. Thankfully, the positives do outweigh those negatives by a good margin. Gotham by Gaslight absolutely delivers on what it set out to do, and that's clearly to create something wholly new and satisfying from something old. The trickle of breadcrumbs are expanded upon and altered, leading to a surprise that I have to say I absolutely did not see coming, and I think that's the key to a good murder mystery. Driven along by stellar performances and some truly engaging action, this is certainly DC's strongest outing in quite some time. It may not be up there with the classics, but it's one hell of a ride and an all-round great Batman story. If you forced me to give it a rating, I would give it a 7 out of 10. Let me know in the comments section down below if you've seen the film and what you think of it, especially in comparison to some of DC's more recent efforts. Did you think it was an improvement as I did? Be sure to rate this video if you enjoyed my thoughts, found them interesting. Be sure to check out my channel if you're new. We do mainly focus on animation of the Japanese variety, but there is plenty for everyone. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.